jurors are present. Go ahead, Mr. McGowan.
Good afternoon, Shay. Shay, in preparing for your testimony today, did you review any reports or transcripts?
Yes.
I'm going to approach with the Exhibit 44.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and take a look at that. Is that something that you reviewed for your interview or for your testimony today?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you review that for your testimony today?
Yes.
Yes. When did you review it?
2 days ago, yesterday.
Okay. So that was an interview that you gave at the station that night, right?
Yes.
Which was a few hours after all this happened?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that your memory of what happened was fresher that night than it is today?
Absolutely.
Okay. And when you gave that interview at the station, that was after you had gone home, right, to your dorm?
Yes.
You had actually had a phone call with your parents, right?
Yes.
Had a little bit of time to calm down before you went to the station?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall, in telling the officers about this first encounter with these guys when they came out to you on the street, that you felt like they were going to hurt you and your friends?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you recall telling the officer that when these guys first came out and were coming at you that you thought they were going to hurt you and your friends?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall after the punch and the shoving to the ground that you told the officer at that moment you wanted to call the police, but they kept advancing on you?
I don't recall saying that.
Okay. So turning to Exhibit 44 there's sort of two parts. I want you to go to the second part. You'll see where the font starts to change, goes to double-spaced, so it starts to renumber. I want you to go to page 1 of the second part.
Okay.
Okay, let me know when you're there.
I'm there. I think. Oh, I see.
Got it? Okay. So there on page 1, line 15, you see that new paragraph there? Go ahead and read that to yourself.
Okay.
Let me know when you're done.
Done.
Okay. So now, does that refresh your recollection? Do you recall telling the officer that you wanted to call the police after they pushed you guys to the ground?
I still don't recall ever saying that.
Well, but you do see here on line 15 where you say, I wanted to call the police at that moment, but they were just kept advancing on me. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. It's in that same paragraph where you again told the officer that they were following you and trying to hurt you, right?
Yes.
And when you say you're referring not just to yourself, but to your friends, right?
Yes.
You remember telling the officer that you felt like they were very aggressive and that they wanted to hurt you guys?
Yes.
And that they weren't going to just let you go?
Yes.
Now, the first person that was shot, you've described for us how that person lunged at Stephen. You didn't know who that person was at the time, right?
No.
Do you know who it is now?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when you were recounting this that evening to the officers, what you said that person did at first before he was shot?
I believe I said he lunged.
Okay. And let's turn to page 8 of this transcript. And actually, at the bottom of page 7, you see where the officer's asking you to tell you more about the guys that lunged at Stephen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, take a moment to read to yourself your answer. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. So, just there on that page 8, those first couple lines, does that refresh your recollection of what you told the officer that evening?
Yes.
Okay. So do you recall now telling the officer that...
Objection, if we're going to refresh recollection, we need to ask the witness if it's refreshed,
I thought I
think
just
you
did
did.
that.
and then he's just going to read what he said.
I didn't read it.
He just asked if he recalled telling the officer, and I didn't hear the rest of his question.
All right.
Go ahead.
So now your memory's refreshed, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall telling the officer that you saw this guy run up to Stephen?
Lunge towards Stephen. Do you mean run up and punch before he had the gun?
No. Let's go back to page 7 there. You see the question. So tell me more about the guy that lunged at Stephen. Last line on page 7. And then your response. Again, you just read that response to yourself, right?
Yes.
Does that refresh your recollection?
When he ran up and punched Stephen, this was before he had the gun.
Okay, so as you look at this, it's refreshing your memory as to the punch earlier.
Yes.
Okay, that's your recollection of what you were telling the officer about.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on. A little bit later, the officer is trying to clarify about the lunge. Do you recall what you told the officer then in describing that lunge?
Yes.
Okay, so what did you tell the officer?
I told the officer that he took a large step, like a lunge, towards Stephen.
Did you also tell the officer that the second guy possibly lunged as well?
I don't remember saying that.
Let's go to page 9. Line 17 there, that's your answer. Go ahead and read that to yourself.
Okay.
Okay. And so you're clear that the first guy lunged, right?
Yes.
Do you recall telling the officer that the second guy possibly did as well?
Objection 106, if you could refer to the 2 lines above.
Okay, starting on line 17 there. They're asking about the lunge. Go ahead and read your answer there to the officer.
I did not see him lunge, but I hope to God Stephen would have not shot someone that didn't at least motion of attack, or at least know that, like, I don't even know. The first guy definitely lunged, the second guy possibly.
Okay, so the second guy possibly as well.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that when these guys attacked you out there on the street that you were terrified?
Yes.
Did you think that you would get brutally beat up?
I thought I was going to get beat up, yes.
You had a very intense fear at that moment?
Pretty intense.
Did you feel like they were not going to stop until you were hurt?
Or until we ran away, yeah.
You have a moment here.
Sure. redirect.
Just a few follow-up questions, Shay. Going back to Exhibit 44, page 9, your response to the officer about the lunge from the second guy was, "I did not see him lunge." Isn't that right?
Yes,
So you don't know what happened if you didn't see it?
I didn't see him.
Okay. Just want to make sure that's clear. When counsel asked you a moment ago if you were terrified, were you terrified of the defendant when he showed up with a gun?
I was more confused than terrified.
Well, don't you recall telling the officers that you thought you might be on a rampage, and that's why you ran away?
I just, after the first two people were shot, I didn't want to be around anyone that had a gun.
Right. At that moment, did you feel like a gun was going to resolve anything?
Just a second. Counsel approach, please.
Judge. Shay, at the point that you turned around and saw the defendant with the gun, at that point, were you able to get away?
I was kind of frozen in shock as to why someone was holding a gun.
Sure. What I mean is, were you surrounded by anybody?
Oh, no.
At that point, were you the farthest away from this group?
From the group that originally, attacked us.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
Sure.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you, Shay.
Okay, I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions. Looks like we do, so I'll see counsel and court reporter at the sidebar.
Thank you.
Your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Excuse me. The state calls Chase Jones.
solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or do you so affirm?
Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you state your name, please?
Chase Jones.
And where'd you grow up, Chase?
Southern California.
Are you, or have you been a NAU student?
Yes.
Are you currently an NAU student?
I am not.
You've graduated?
No.
Okay.
I left.
You've moved on?
Yeah.
In the fall of 2015, were you an NAU student?
Yes.
And where were you living at the time?
At the time I was living in Mountain View.
Mountain View Hall?
Yes.
Right. Which wing, if you recall?
The one closest to Franklin.
Okay.
I don't remember what wings they call them or things like that.
All right. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pull that microphone a little bit closer to you, just so you're a little soft-spoken.
All right.
So, fair to say that Mountain View Hall housed exclusively fraternities and sororities at the time?
Yes.
And were you in a fraternity?
I was.
Which fraternity was that?
Pi Kappa Phi.
Okay. That, wherever your room, did that overlook the parking lot there that's adjacent to Mountain View?
No.
Okay. Chase, I'm going to ask you about the events of the early morning hours of October 9th of 2015. Do you recall that time frame?
I do.
Somewhere shortly after 1 a.m., were you at home at Mountain View?
I was.
And where were you?
I was in my hall. I was going down to the lobby to fill up a water jug. They only had one drinking fountain in the whole building at the time.
Okay, so you were headed down to the lobby at that time, in that
Yes.
time frame? And had you been out that night drinking at all?
I had not. I'd been in my room playing video games.
Okay. So when you were in the lobby, what were you doing?
I was just filling up my water, and then my RA worked the desk that night, so it was kind of normal that I'd go over and talk to him. So I was heading over to talk to him.
Okay. Was there something that happened in that time frame that captured your attention?
In that time frame, walking over, there was another two, I think it was an RA, who came up from, there's a floor below. They came up from that floor and said that they had heard gunshots. And
You're saying?
Sustained.
Okay. So they said something. I'm not going to ask you what they said. And again, without indicating what was said, did anybody else come through and say something alarming?
no, those were the only two.
Okay. Did you respond to that in any way? And I don't mean verbally, I mean,
Yeah, there was a window that overlooked the parking lot, and I walked over there because two of my brothers I hadn't seen him for a while. One was my roommate, and the other one had been driving that night, and so I knew I could see his car from that window. So I went to see if I could see his car or see them.
okay, so you looked out the window?
Yes.
Which direction did you see when you looked out that window?
I believe the direction that that window faces is north,
Okay. What
so
were you
towards Franklin.
Towards Franklin?
And the parking lot, yes.
In the parking lot, okay. Fair to say there's Mountain View, and then there's this like wide sidewalk or driveway, and then the parking lot?
Yes.
And is that the area that you could see?
Yes, it is.
All right. When you looked out the window, can you describe to the jury what you saw at that time?
At that time, kind of looking out the window, I just saw there was a girl in the parking lot, and she was in a lighter color. It might have been white or pink. And she was in a parking space, and there was somebody she was kind of helping. And so that was basically all I saw was that, and kind of thought to myself, oh, something had happened.
All right. So that's all you saw?
Yes.
What did you do next?
After that, I turned, ran to the stairs, and told my RA to call 911, and then I ran out into the parking lot.
All right, which direction did you go, or how did you get out to the parking lot?
So down the middle floor kind of thing towards the bottom lobby to the wide the wide sidewalk, and ran along the sidewalk until I got into the parking lot.
All right. What did you see when you arrived in the parking lot?
When I arrived in the parking lot, there was the girl that I had previously seen. She was hunched over helping somebody who had been hurt, and then there was a small little rock like patch thing where they put bushes and stuff, and there was a kid in those bushes with another two over him, and then I saw somebody who was standing back, and I approached them to ask them what was going on.
All right, let's talk about, you said there were two over him. What do you mean by that?
They were kind of hunched over, like he had been hurt, and they were trying to help him or do something.
Okay. Did you notice whether he was moving or not?
I do not remember.
Okay. Do you remember whether the other guy with the girl helping him was moving or not?
He was kind of moving his legs a little bit, but that's all I remember.
So you said that there was another guy kind of standing back?
Yes.
Describe to the jury what you saw.
So I had just seen somebody standing back. I had taken a class, and it was kind of mentioned stuff about like first aid, to ask somebody who's not helping, who they think needs help most. And so I approached to ask that, and basically he was turned away from me at the time.
All right. Can you describe, and we'll show you some photos in a few minutes, but can you describe where that person was relative to the two people who were on the ground and the people that were helping them?
So he would have been kind of towards the west, towards more so inner campus, and the other two people would be closer to Mountain View Hall, so towards the east.
Are you able to estimate distances between them?
I'm not very good at distances, so no.
All right. So you went to ask him essentially who needed help, right?
Yes.
And what was the next observation you made?
The next observation I made, he turned around, and I just noticed a quick movement of the hand moving towards behind his back, and I could kind of see the bottom end of like a handgun. And so at the time, my train of thought went, okay, I'm gonna not worry about these other people, and make sure I'm not gonna get hurt myself.
All right. So I think you described which direction he was facing when you first saw him, and maybe can you give us a little more detail about that, how he was standing, which direction he was looking?
So the direction he was looking was, again, towards the west. And so when I came up, I asked, hey, what's going on? And that's when he turned around to face me. So he wasn't initially facing me when I got out there.
All right. And that's when you saw the hand movement behind the back? So you described how your thought process changed when you made that observation. What did you do?
After that, I started to talk to the said individual, because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't want to become somebody else who was hurt. I didn't want to turn my back and somehow end up, because I didn't know what was going on. So I started to talk to him and try and, figure out what was going on.
What do you mean very lightly?
I didn't really want to know what was going on. I just didn't want to be another casualty or somebody hurt along with everything else.
Okay. Where were you standing when you initiated that conversation?
So I was a little bit back. There was a tree and like a sidewalk with a curb, and it was in front of a couple of parking spots, and so that's where I was standing.
Do you recall which hand he was holding the gun in?
I don't fully remember now.
So, not what was said, but did he reference towards any other people in the parking lot area?
Yeah, so he pointed to another individual who was further west, closer to campus.
How far away? I know you said you're not good
Maybe
with distances, but...
3 or 4 parking spots, so in the parking lot.
All right. Can you, I'm going to ask you, with leave of the court, if you'll stand up and demonstrate the hand behind the back movement that you observed.
So, I guess from my perspective, I would have been facing this kind of angle, and the person was in front of me over there, so it would have been like this, and he just went kind of like that as he turned around.
All right. What was the next action that you took?
The next action was I kind of started talking to him, trying to take the gun kind of out of the picture, get it out of anybody's hands at that point, just so that it wasn't something that could be used or anything like that.
All right. And what else did you notice going on at that time? Anything you could hear?
Just kind of grunts from people on the ground and people trying to talk to them and trying to help.
Anything relative to the police?
Sirens had kind of started in the distance. You could hear them. They were coming up. So the police were coming at that time.
Were you ultimately successful in your endeavor to take the gun out of the picture?
Yes.
Again, not what was said, but there was a verbal interaction between you and the person with the gun?
Yes, there was.
And then what happened with the gun?
The gun was put down, so again, there was a sidewalk with a small curb, so the gun was put down on the other side of the curb closest to me, and then I basically kind of stood over it till police arrived.
So did the person with the gun have to walk towards you in order to place the gun there?
A small step, maybe.
Okay, so he was already in that rough area before
Yes,
he put the gun down? And again, you could already hear the sirens at that point?
I could.
Did you notice whether there was a flashlight on the gun?
I would not remember now.
Okay. But you didn't see anything illuminated on the gun, is that fair?
No, I was not paying attention to it.
So you stood essentially guard over that gun, is that right?
That's right.
Did you notice whether the person with the gun manipulated it at all before he put it down?
No.
To clarify, did he manipulate it or not?
He did not manipulate it.
He did not.
Did not.
So what happened next?
After that, The individual started to kind of walk away from where he had just put the gun down, and he walked towards the gate, leaving that parking lot, and that was right as police kind of arrived, and they picked him up. He walked away like stunned, kind of, by what was going on, almost in disbelief.
Okay. So, did you keep an eye on that gun?
I did.
And did anybody else approach you or the gun?
The person that was further west kind of made his way towards me, and that was the only person, but before he got anywhere close at all, police had arrived and we were all detained.
Did you know anybody that was involved?
Not a single person.
What was the total number of people that you saw in the parking lot from the time that you came out until the police arrived and detained everyone?
So there were the three in the rocks, the girl and the other guy that were in the parking lot, in the parking space, the individual, and another person further west, so about 7, 8, including myself.
Okay. Fair to say the police handcuffed everybody, including yourself?
Yes.
The state, with leave of the court, will project Exhibit 316 again. Chase, I'm going to ask you to direct your attention to that screen. Do you see what's projected on the screen there?
Yes.
What's the building that we're looking at in that view?
So this building right here is all Mountain View, where I was living.
All right. And you indicated previously that your room does not look out over this parking lot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you able, you might find a laser pointer up there on the desk.
Okay.
Are you able to see in this view the window that you looked out of or the door you came out of?
No, but it was right on the other side of this tree.
Let me try that closer view. If you can turn towards the building. How about in this view, Chase? Are you able to see here the window you looked out of or the door you came out of?
Yes, so that's the window that I was looking out of, and then there's a doorway right here.
All right, so that's a little distance away. Would you agree?
A little bit.
And then, so you came out that door and you ran essentially towards the camera? Towards
Yes.
this point of view? All right. So if we'll turn around now, do you recognize what's depicted here?
Yes.
And can you indicate to the jury where you saw each of the people that you've described?
So this is the little rock bush area right here, where I saw the 3 individuals, and then I was standing roughly in this area, and then in one of these 2 parking spots towards the edge of it was the girl and the other guy that was hurt, and I made interactions around right here and this kind of parking spot close to that curb, and then you can't really see it from this view, but the other guy was over there, the one that was the furthest west.
All right. So let's take a closer view and all right. So
area around the curb, and the individual would have been somewhere right around here, close to about a step from the curb.
All right.
Two.
And so when you first saw him, he was looking essentially to the right in this point of view, is that fair?
Yes.
All right, so now let's turn a little bit to the right. And if you can, are you able to indicate in this view roughly where that other person that was further to the west in the parking lot was?
If the view could continue going right a little bit, the individual was maybe around here. He was illuminated by one of the street lights.
All right. Anything else? If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
Your Honor, if I may project again what's been admitted as Exhibit 353.
Go ahead.
So, Chase, can you see the area that's depicted in this video?
Yeah.
Is that the same area we've been discussing?
Yes, it is.
Cumulative prejudicial, this is video that was filmed prior to this witness's arrival. We've already had Leica scan footage of this. It's just to prejudice the jury. We don't need it. It's cumulative.
Ever see counsel at a reported sidebar, please?
Did you see that? I didn't touch it.
The objection is sustained. Could I have counsel approach, please?
Chase, the individual who was further to the west in the parking lot, was he detained by the police along with the other people that were in that immediate area?
I don't actually know. I was detained facing the opposite way.
Okay. All right. During the period of time that you were involved in this situation, did you see any other weapons either in anybody's hands or on the ground?
No.
That's all, Judge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Cross-examine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Jones.
Good afternoon.
At some point subsequent to this event you described, did you learn that the individual who was holding the gun that you interacted with was an individual by the name of Stephen Jones?
I did afterwards.
Okay. I'm going to refer to him as Stephen, if that's okay.
That's okay.
Now, when you came down from the lobby area, you ran, didn't you?
Yes.
And you were still running as you approached Stephen, weren't you?
No, I had stopped running by the time I reached Stephen.
How close were you to Stephen when you stopped running?
I can't really judge distances, but I was on that one side of the curb as I showed, and he was just on the other side.
Okay. Can we bring up 316? Just let your list.
Yes, I do.
There's a bird's eye view you could bring up.
We don't have that.
Are you able to show us here where Mr. Jones was and where you were when you came down?
So I would have been roughly around this area, and he was somewhere around in this area about.
So approximately the width of a parking stall plus maybe a foot or two behind the curb?
Maybe.
Okay. And so you basically stopped running when you got to that tree?
That's correct.
Incidentally, that tree is approximately the same location where Mr. Jones set down the pistol, correct?
Well, it was on this, there's a sidewalk right here. So it was on the other side of the curb on the sidewalk.
Underneath the tree?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And when you ran to that position that you just indicated us, Mr. Jones didn't respond to you in an aggressive manner, did he?
No.
He didn't spin around and yell at you, did he?
No.
He didn't point a gun at you, did he?
No.
The police officers had not yet arrived at the parking lot when you came down from the lobby, had they?
No, they had not.
Was Stephen running when you got down there?
No.
Was he walking away?
No.
He was just standing there, wasn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you addressed Stephen and he turned around, you made some observations of his face, didn't you?
Yes.
And he had some injuries, didn't he?
Yes.
He was bleeding from the nose, correct?
That's correct.
When you were talking to Stephen, you also noticed that he was visibly upset, didn't you?
Yes.
In fact, he was physically shaking, wasn't he?
A little bit, yes.
Physically shaking enough that you actually saw him shaking, correct?
No, more of like a shaken look, if that makes sense.
Did you talk to the police after this incident?
I did.
You gave them a statement?
I did.
You provided answers as accurate as you possibly could?
Yes.
May I approach the witness with Exhibit 30?
Yes. It is 30 for the record.
Just take a moment, please, and take a look at Exhibit 30, and let me know if you recognize that as a copy of the transcript from your interview with the police in connection with this matter. Is that what that appears to be?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me direct your attention, please, Chase, to page 10, starting at line 21.
Just a second.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Through line 2 on the following page, page 11. Do you see where you're, on 21 you state, he was shaken, I mean very obviously shaken, but that the only thing that really kind of about him that seemed off was that question, he was shaking, answer, he was shaking. And it seemed kind of off how easily he just listened to me and put the gun down. That was your statement to the police on the date this occurred, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. When you were talking to Stephen and he was physically shaking, he was describing what had occurred prior to you getting down there, didn't he?
A little bit, yes.
He was talking about what happened with the other individuals who were down there, correct?
Is there a way to rephrase that?
May we approach?
Yes.
Listened to you and put the gun down, correct?
Yes.
And that's in fact what happened. You asked him to put the gun down, he put it down, correct?
Yes.
He never tried to pretend like he didn't have a gun, did he?
No.
He never held the gun under his shirt, correct?
No.
He never said, "Gun, what gun are you talking about?"
No.
You just saw that the gun was in his hand and his hand was behind his back at some point when he turned around.
That's correct.
You didn't see what happened before you got there, did you?
No, I did not.
You don't know whether or not people were trying to take the gun from him prior to your arrival at the parking lot, do you?
No.
There was no hostility at all in Stephen's demeanor when you contacted him, was there?
No.
So you run to that location you showed us. He's shaking, he's not hostile, and he's very cooperative with you. True?
Yes.
And in fact, in that same interaction, you were able to physically touch him on the shoulder and say, look, man, I don't care, just put down the gun.
Yes.
When you touched him, did he push you?
No.
Did he recoil back?
No.
Did he make a furtive movement towards you?
No.
Didn't act aggressively, did he?
Not at all.
When Stephen started heading towards the, I suppose it would be the north end of the parking lot towards Franklin Avenue,
Yes.
he wasn't running, was he?
No.
He was just walking, wasn't he?
Yes.
You never made any statement to Stephen telling him to surrender himself to the police, did you?
No. Not that I recall.
Do you recall telling Stephen that you would, something to the effect that you would watch over his gun and make sure that nobody touched it or took it?
Yes.
I have just a very brief moment, Your Honor. Sure. In response to the prosecutor's questions, you spoke about another individual to whom Stephen pointed or gestured.
Yes.
Could you describe that?
That was just the person who was farther west in the parking lot.
Without going into what was said, was it your understanding when you were talking to Stephen after that that he may have had some concern about that other person that you were referring to?
Just a second. The basis of your objection.
May we approach?
Sure. Objection is sustained. The question will be rephrased.
You indicated that you told Stephen that you would not let anybody take his gun or grab his gun, correct?
That's correct.
Based on your interaction with him and his gesturing to this other individual who was some distance away, was it your intent in making that statement to him to alleviate any concern that may have existed about someone coming and grabbing the gun?
Yes.
Thank you, Chief. Nothing further, Judge.
Redirect.
Thank you.
the defense counsel asked you about Stephen being cooperative with you, and you answered in the affirmative. Is that fair?
Yes.
Could you hear the sirens at that time of that cooperation?
Yes.
Nothing further. Thank you, Judge.
All right, I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions for this witness. Looks like we do. See counsel and court reporter at a sidebar. Mr. Jones, the jury does have a few questions for you. The first question is, how big are the rocks around the parking lot?
I'm sorry?
How big are the rocks around the parking lot?
I really don't know. They're kind of like the rocks you'd put in like a backyard or like a... I really don't know how to describe how big they are.
Okay. The next question is, did you run across the rocks?
I did.
The next question is, did you see anyone running in the opposite direction?
No.
Okay. Follow up, Mr. Shea.
Nothing, Judge, thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Just to clarify, Jason, when the juror asked, did you see anyone heading or running in the direction, just so we're all on the same page, which direction did you understand that to be relative to something else?
Away from the incident.
In any direction away from it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Jones, thank you for your testimony. You are excused. All right, folks, let's recess for 10 minutes. Remember the admonition.